My name is Sophia Bennett, and I am 48 years old, single, and proud of it. For the past 2 decades, I have led a fulfilling life as the president of a thriving company, focusing on my work and personal growth. Marriage was never a priority for me, as I cherished my independence too much to risk it on an uncertain relationship. That all changed one fateful day when Logan Harris, the head of a well-established business and a longtime professional acquaintance, approached me with a proposal. "Sophia, I'd like you to meet my youngest son, John," Logan said. "He's a good man, kind, thoughtful, and I think you two could be a good match." Out of respect for Logan, I agreed to meet John. At first, he appeared harmless, perhaps a bit awkward and immature, but polite enough. Over the next few months, we began dating. Though there were small red flags, I brushed them aside. Over the following weeks, John's charm, although laced with immaturity, began to wear me down. His words were sometimes condescending, but I attributed it to his lack of real-world experience. No one is perfect, I told myself. Maybe he just needed time and patience to mature. 3 months into our relationship, John proposed. "Let's get engaged," he said with a hopeful smile. "We can grow together, Sophia." I hesitated for a moment, but my heart softened. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. With the engagement set, it was time to meet John's family, the people who would soon become part of my life. I knew it would be a challenge. After all, a businesswoman in her late 40s doesn't exactly fit the traditional mold of a bride-to-be. I spent hours preparing for the visit, ensuring everything about me reflected class and confidence. My hair was styled to perfection, my clothes carefully chosen, and my demeanor calm and professional. I was ready, or so I thought. The day arrived, and John picked me up and drove me to his family's home. His demeanor was unusually quiet, almost nervous, but I chose to overlook it. As we entered the Adams' lavish living room, I smiled warmly and extended my hand to greet his mother, Morgan. What happened next was something I could never have anticipated. Morgan stood in the center of the room, eyeing me from head to toe with an expression I couldn't quite place, part curiosity, part disdain. The handshake I offered was left hanging in the air, ignored, as she folded her arms tightly across her chest. "So, you're Sophia Bennett," she finally said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I've heard a lot about you." "Thank you, Mrs. Harris," I replied politely, refusing to react to her obvious lack of warmth. John stood to the side, his hands buried in his pockets, saying nothing. His silence was noticeable, but I chose to focus on making a good impression. We sat down, and Morgan began her interrogation almost immediately. "Sophia, John tells me you run a business," she said, forcing a smile. "That's unconventional for a woman, isn't it?" I returned her smile calmly. "It's been my passion for over 2 decades, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished." Her forced grin faltered, replaced by a sneer. "Well, I suppose when one comes from humble beginnings, they have no choice but to work." The implication was clear. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Hard work has always been a point of pride for me, Mrs. Harris. It teaches discipline and independence." Morgan laughed lightly, as though I'd said something amusing. "Independence? Oh, I see." She leaned forward slightly. "But don't you think independence is overrated, especially at your age? Women are meant to create families, not companies." My heart began to pound, but I maintained my composure. I had dealt with tough business negotiations before. This was no different. John, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. That silence hurt more than I was willing to admit. Morgan continued, her voice growing sharper. "You know, Sophia, John deserves someone who can uphold our family's reputation. People are already talking about this match, wondering what kind of woman doesn't marry until she's pushing 50. I was stunned. Before I could respond, she delivered her final blow. "With parents like yours, you'll drag our family name into the dirt. Don't expect us to accept you." The room went silent. My hands tightened into fists at my sides as her words hung heavily in the air. John smirked, not a word of defense, no attempt to stop his mother. His complicity was louder than her insults. Morgan wasn't done. She picked up the steaming cup of coffee in front of her, the smug look on her face a clear warning. "Consider this your farewell gift," she said. And before I could react, she hurled the coffee straight at me. The cup clattered to the floor as the hot liquid splashed across my face, soaking my clothes and stinging my skin. I gasped, stunned. The shock rendered me momentarily speechless. John's laughter filled the room, sharp, mocking, and cruel. "That's enough." Mr. Harris's voice thundered from across the room, but it was too late. Slowly, I wiped the coffee from my face with the back of my hand. My expensive blouse was ruined, and the humiliation seared deeper than the liquid. But I refused to give Morgan or John the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. Calmly, I stood up. "Thank you for showing me exactly what kind of family I was about to marry into, a family I never should have joined." My voice was steady and strong as I spoke. "I'll save you the trouble of dragging your name into the dirt. This engagement is over." Morgan's smirk disappeared instantly, and John's laughter cut off abruptly, his face paling. "What? Sophia." "Wait," John stammered, finally finding his voice, but it was far too late. I turned to Mr. Harris. "Thank you for your cooperation in our business dealings over the years, Mr. Harris. I'll have my team contact yours to discuss any next steps." Without another word, I walked out of the room, leaving behind the echoes of their stunned silence. As I walked out of the Adams house, my heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step echoing in the quiet hallway. My face and clothes were still damp from the coffee, but I refused to let it break my resolve. I had dealt with far worse challenges in my career. This was just another test of character. Behind me, I could hear Morgan's indignant voice rising in protest. "How dare she?" she screeched. "John, go after her. Fix this." But John, true to form, did nothing. His silence was his answer. He would never stand up for me. The drive back was quiet. I sat in the back of the car John had arranged earlier, staring out the window, lost in thought. My reflection in the glass revealed the coffee stains marring my blouse and the slight redness on my cheek from where the liquid had splashed. How did I let it get this far? I wondered, shaking my head at my own lapse in judgment. At first, John had seemed harmless, maybe even endearing. His lack of maturity, his awkward attempts to impress me, I had dismissed them as quirks of a sheltered man. I told myself that patience could fix his flaws and that, with time, he might grow into a better partner. But the events of today were a wake-up call. As the car approached my home, I replayed the scene in my mind. Morgan's cruel insults about my family, John's smirk, his refusal to defend me, the hot coffee dripping down my face. I thought back to the way Morgan mocked my parents, belittling their background and implying I was unworthy. My parents may not have been wealthy, but they were good, honest people who raised me with love and integrity, something far more valuable than all the wealth in the world. John's laughter hurt the most. He could have stopped his mother. He could have defended me. Instead, he joined in her cruelty, exposing his true nature. I realized then that this wasn't just about Morgan. John was part of the problem, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. This engagement wasn't just over. It never should have happened in the first place. When I finally stepped into my home, I went straight to my room, peeled off my ruined blouse, and tossed it in the laundry hamper. The mirror reflected a woman who had just walked through fire and come out stronger. I washed my face, removing every last trace of the coffee, and took a deep breath. This wasn't a loss, it was a victory. I had escaped a toxic family and an unworthy partner before it was too late. I sat on my couch with a glass of water and picked up my phone. A message from John blinked on the screen. "Sophia, my mom didn't mean it. Let's talk." please. I stared at the words, shaking my head. There was nothing left to say. With one final tap, I blocked his number. The morning after the disastrous meeting at the Harris house, I arrived at my office with a renewed sense of purpose. My assistant glanced up, noticing the determined expression on my face. "Everything okay, Miss Bennet?" she asked cautiously. "Never better," I replied, setting my bag down. I had a plan to deal with the Harris family, not out of spite, but to ensure they faced the consequences of their actions. As the president of a thriving company, I didn't rise to where I was by letting people walk over me. Morgan and John had crossed a line, and it was time they learned what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. I drafted a formal letter to Logan Harris's company, clear, concise, and professional, stating my decision to reevaluate and temporarily suspend all business contracts. The letter cited increasing concerns over leadership integrity and reliability as the reason. I ensured the wording was airtight, leaving no room for negotiation. Once I signed the letter, I handed it to my assistant. "Have this sent over immediately." She nodded, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Will this hurt their company?" "Not intentionally," I replied calmly, "but they need to learn that actions have consequences. I won't partner with anyone I can't trust." That evening, my phone rang. The caller ID read Logan Harris. I picked up, expecting his call. His voice trembled with desperation. "Sophia, please, you don't understand what you've done. This will destroy us." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Harris," I replied coldly. "I gave your family trust and respect, and in return, I was humiliated. That coffee your wife threw at me wasn't just liquid. It was a symbol of your family's arrogance and entitlement." Logan stammered, searching for words, but I cut him off. "Our company, our employees, your family's actions brought this upon themselves." I said firmly, "I've made my decision. There's nothing more to discuss." I hung up the phone, knowing full well what would happen next. Over the next few weeks, news of Adams Enterprises' collapse spread like wildfire. Investors pulled out, and the loss of my company's partnership revealed their deep financial troubles, leading to plummeting investor confidence. Suppliers withdrew support, and with debts piling up, Harris Enterprises struggled to pay suppliers, causing delays and further losses. Employee layoffs followed, leaving employees scrambling for jobs. The media began reporting the downfall in brutal headlines. Harris Enterprises was on the brink of collapse after losing a key partnership. Greed and mismanagement had toppled a once thriving family business empire. Morgan and John became the faces of failure, with reporters hounding them for answers. Morgan, once so proud and arrogant, now hid from the cameras, while John's smug demeanor was replaced with panic. Unable to accept their failure, they stewed in bitterness. In their eyes, I was the villain, the one who had brought down their empire. "They'll pay for this," Morgan reportedly told a close friend. "We'll make sure of it." Their desperation grew, and I had no idea what they were planning next. A month after the collapse of Adams Enterprises, I was certain that chapter of my life had closed. My company was thriving, and the Harris family had reaped what they had sown. But just when I thought it was over, the storm returned. It was a quiet Monday morning when Diana walked into my office holding a thick envelope, concern etched on her face. "This came for you, Miss Bennet," she said softly. I frowned, taking the envelope and tearing it open. My stomach sank as I read the first few lines. Asterisk plaintiffs Morgan Harris and John Harris alleged that Sophia Bennet deliberately sabotaged Harris Enterprises, resulting in financial ruin. A lawsuit has been filed demanding compensation for damages, asterisk. I placed the document on my desk, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "They're trying to pin their failure on me." Diana watched me anxiously. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I straightened in my chair, my resolve hardening. "Call Ava Clark. Tell her I need to see her immediately." By afternoon, I was sitting across from Ava Clark, my sharp and dependable lawyer. She scanned the lawsuit, her brow furrowing in irritation. "This is outrageous," she said, tossing the papers onto the table. "They're claiming you intentionally sabotaged their company to ruin them. They're desperate," I replied calmly. "They can't accept that their failure was their own doing, so they're trying to drag me down with them." Ava leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. "They've underestimated us again. We'll not only prove their case is baseless, but we'll expose everything. Their lies, their financial fraud, and their incompetence. What's our strategy?" I asked. "First, we'll file a countersuit for defamation and damages to your reputation. Then we'll gather every piece of evidence to dismantle their case and show the court the truth." I nodded. "Let's do it. I won't let them destroy what I've built." Within days, news of the lawsuit exploded across media outlets. The Harris family, desperate for sympathy, gave interviews painting themselves as victims of my supposed vengeance. Morgan appeared on television, her face carefully composed to appear broken and betrayed. "She wanted to destroy us," Morgan sniffled, tears in her voice. "We gave her our trust, and she turned it against us. It was a performance worthy of an award, but I wasn't worried. Behind the scenes, Ava and my legal team were gathering evidence, a mountain of undeniable proof that the Harris family's downfall had nothing to do with me. In the weeks leading up to the trial, we uncovered the following: financial fraud, with records proving that Morgan and John had siphoned funds from Adams Enterprises into personal accounts to maintain their lifestyle. Evidence of reckless decisions that had put the company in financial ruin long before our partnership ended. False claims and documentation showing that my company had fulfilled every obligation in our contract with Harris Enterprises. This lawsuit is a desperate attempt to deflect blame," Ava said during our final strategy meeting. "We'll expose every lie in court." I nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and resolve. It's time to end this for good. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed with reporters eagerly waiting to see how the case would unfold. I sat calmly at my table, Ava beside me, while Morgan and John sat across the room. Their faces were etched with forced confidence. The proceedings began, and Morgan's lawyer stood up to present their case. Sophia Bennett maliciously terminated her partnership with Adams Enterprises, deliberately causing its collapse out of personal spite. Morgan dabbed her eyes with a tissue for dramatic effect, while John avoided looking in my direction. Then it was Ava's turn. She rose to her feet, her voice sharp and commanding. "Your Honor, the claims made by the plaintiffs are not only false, but deliberately fabricated to deflect blame for their own failures. We will present clear evidence that Adams Enterprises' financial collapse was due to internal fraud and mismanagement, not my client's actions." One by one, Ava presented the evidence. Bank statements showing funds funneled into Morgan and John's personal accounts, internal emails and records proving poor financial decisions were made months before the partnership ended, my company's records showing I had fulfilled every term of our agreement. The courtroom watched as Ava systematically dismantled the Adams family's claims. Morgan's confident facade began to crack, and John sat frozen, realizing the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. When Ava finished, the judge turned to Morgan and John. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Morgan stammered, her voice weak. It wasn't supposed to be like this." John simply looked down, too ashamed to speak. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his ruling. "The evidence clearly shows that the plaintiffs, Morgan Harris and John Harris, filed false claims against the defendant. In an attempt to shift blame for their own failures, the court found Morgan and John Harris guilty of defamation, perjury, and corporate fraud. The judge delivered a harsh sentence. Morgan and John were ordered to pay damages to compensate for the harm done to my reputation. Both were also sentenced to prison for their crimes. The courtroom erupted into whispers as they were led away. Morgan screamed, "This isn't fair," while John followed silently, his face pale and defeated. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight that had burdened me for weeks finally lifted. The Harris family had been exposed for what they truly were: fraudulent, arrogant, and entitled. Justice had been served, and the world now knew the truth. Ava walked beside me, her expression one of quiet triumph. "They underestimated you, Sophia," she said with a smirk, "and look where it got them." I smiled faintly. They played a dangerous game and lost. This was never about revenge. It was about defending what's rightfully mine. News of the trial spread like wildfire. Media outlets published headlines that made the Harris family's downfall inevitable. Morgan and John Harris exposed for lies, fraud, and humiliation in courtroom drama. Harris Enterprises' final fall. Greed and mismanagement lead to ruin. Morgan began her 3-year sentence for fraud and perjury, while John, sentenced to 2 years, spent his days behind bars, reflecting on his downfall. The damages awarded to my company wiped out whatever wealth the Harris family had left. Their mansion and assets were seized to pay off their debts, leaving Morgan and John with nothing. Morgan, once the picture of arrogance, became a symbol of failure and greed. John, abandoned by the few friends he had left, now bore a name synonymous with shame. Logan Harris, who had stayed out of the courtroom drama, quietly sold off the remnants of Adams Enterprises. He retired in disgrace, leaving behind the empire he had once proudly built. In the weeks following the trial, my company soared to even greater heights. The lawsuit had been a test, but it proved my integrity and strength to everyone watching. Clients and business partners praised me for standing up to injustice. Far from being damaged, my reputation emerged stronger than ever. At a celebration dinner held by my team, Diana raised a toast to me, to Sophia Bennett, our fearless leader. May no one ever doubt her strength again. Laughter and applause filled the room as I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, and I had won. Months passed, and word trickled in about Morgan and John's lives post-trial. Morgan, once so proud and condescending, was now a forgotten figure. After serving her sentence, she moved into a rundown apartment, abandoned by everyone she had once flaunted her wealth to. John, having lost his cushy life, struggled to adapt to reality. No one wanted to hire a disgraced man convicted of fraud. I never wished harm upon them, but their fate was of their own making. They had tried to destroy me, and instead, they had destroyed themselves. One evening, I stood on my balcony with a cup of tea, looking out over the city's skyline. The air was cool, and for the first time in months, I felt peace, true, unshakable peace. This journey had taught me many things. Never compromise your dignity for anyone. Always stand up for yourself, even when the world doubts you. Happiness, I realized, isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build for yourself, day by day. I turned to head back inside, as my phone buzzed with a new email. A proposal for a partnership from a major international company. Life was moving forward, and I was ready for it. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. What would you have done if you were in Sophia's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, remember, stand tall, fight back, and never let anyone take away your dignity.